The war between humans and the alien Bharati had ended. Treaties were signed. Blood was wiped off the dirt, and soldiers packed up to go home. But for one human, Kalen, an engineer and former war mechanic, home was still far away. He stayed behind to help rebuild a small Bharati village on the edge of the desert. He fixed their machines, rebuilt their water lines, and repaired old power cores. Even though they once called humans invaders, now they lined up for his help. Kalen didn't do it for thanks. He just liked building things and fixing what others gave up on. One day, a fancy black hovercar landed near his small workshop. Dust flew everywhere as the vehicle doors opened with a hiss. Out stepped Lord Baron Vess, a proud and cruel alien leader with golden horns and long violet robes. He was followed by guards in black armor, their weapons shining under the sun. Villagers bowed quickly. Whispering his name with fear, Kalen stood still, wiping grease from his hands. The Baron smiled in a strange way and approached him. "I heard the human is good with broken things," the Baron said, voice full of mockery. Kalen didn't answer. Right away, he simply nodded. "Then you'll love this." The Baron snapped his fingers. Another hovercar arrived, and from it, they brought out a thin, pale girl. She was no older than 20. Her body weak, legs stiff, eyes full of silence. She sat in a hover chair, her limbs unmoving, her expression like a frozen mask. Her skin was marked with scars, and her long silver hair was tangled and dusty. "This," the Baron said loudly, so everyone could hear, "is my daughter Vera, useless and broken." He laughed as if it were the best joke in the world. "You fixed machines, now fix her," he added, "or throw her in your junk pile." Gasps came from the villagers, but no one dared speak. It was a cruel joke, a gift meant to insult, not honor. Kalen looked at the girl. She didn't move, didn't cry, didn't even blink. He could see in her dull purple eyes. She was not sleeping, just empty inside. Everyone expected him to walk away, to say no, to return the cruel gift. But instead, Kalen walked toward her quietly. He bent down and gently touched her hand. Her fingers were cold, her bones thin as sticks. Then he looked up at the Baron and said, "I'll take her." The Baron laughed louder. "Of course you will, human. You fix broken things." He waved and turned away, leaving with his guards, proud of his wicked joke. The villagers watched in silence as Kalen lifted the fragile girl into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, like a forgotten doll. He carried her to his workshop, where the air was thick with the smell of oil and old wires. Vera didn't speak, not even once. She just stared ahead, as if she had been buried alive inside her own body. Inside the lab, Kalen placed her gently on a soft recliner beside the heater. He brought water, a blanket, and wrapped her in silence. No questions, no orders, just warmth and peace. Later that night, he sat at his work table, watching her as she lay still. He could hear the wind outside and the crackling power cells humming softly. And then softly he whispered, "I don't think you're broken." For the next few days, Kalen didn't rush anything. He cooked for her, cleaned her face, brushed her tangled hair every morning. He tried to speak with her, but Vera never replied. She only watched with tired eyes, sometimes blinking slowly. But something began to change. The stiffness in her shoulders faded, her breathing grew stronger, and one evening, she moved her fingers ever so slightly. Kalen noticed, but didn't make a big deal. He simply smiled and said, "Well done." At night, he worked on something. Quietly, a plan, a design, a hope, a new kind of exoframe, small and smooth. Built not for war, but for healing. He had built machines to kill before. Now, he wanted to build one that could help someone stand again. But it would only work if Vera wanted it. And right now, she didn't believe in anything, not even herself. But Kalen wasn't giving up. He saw something no one else saw, not a joke, not a burden, but a girl with fire buried deep inside her frozen shell. And he was going to light that fire, no matter how long it took. Kalen's workshop stood at the edge of the desert, but his real work was done underground. Beneath the floor, hidden behind a heavy metal hatch, was his true lab, a place filled with tech from Earth and salvage from fallen ships. It was a secret space, untouched by war or pride, where silence and light danced over glass tables and glowing blueprints. And it was here that he brought Vera. Her hover chair moved slowly down the ramp as Kalen guided her inside. She didn't speak, just looked around at the strange machines. Metal arms hanging from the ceiling, drawers full of wires, tubes, and blinking circuits. Her eyes stopped at a table where something new was being built. A thin skeleton of steel and fiber. Shaped like human legs, she stared for a long time, but said nothing. Kalen pushed her closer, then sat across from her. "I made these for you," he said quietly. Her eyes blinked slowly, but her face showed no emotion. "I call them assistive exolimbs," he explained. "They read brain signals and move like real legs." He picked up a small glowing chip, placing it gently near her hand. "With this, your thoughts can speak to the machine." Still, she didn't answer. Kalen sighed and leaned back. "I won't force you," he said, "but I'll keep building until you say yes." The next few days passed with quiet routine. Kalen worked on the exoframe during the day, testing each joint, each fiber connection. He talked while he worked. Not just about machines, but stories from Earth, music he missed, food he wanted to taste again. Vera listened, always silent. But her head began turning more often, her eyes following the sound of his voice. One evening, Kalen played a music file. Soft piano notes filled the air. It reminded him of home, of forests and rain. As the music played, he turned to see Vera's fingers twitch again. This time, they moved with purpose, reaching out, slow and shaky. She touched the chip he had placed days ago. Then she looked up at him, her lips trembling. "I want to stand," she whispered, voice dry like dust, but full of something new. Kalen froze for a moment, shocked, then smiled gently. "You will," he replied. "I promise." That night, he worked harder than ever. The final model had to be perfect, strong, light, and safe. He added shock absorbers, smart balance modules, and a voice-activated shutdown just in case. He also designed arm braces to help with balance. When he brought the suit to her the next morning, she stared at it like it was something holy. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded slowly. Kalen helped her out of the chair for the first time, holding her body with care. Her legs were weak, too thin to carry her weight. He gently strapped the exoframe around her, every piece clicking into place. Vera gritted her teeth, sweat forming on her forehead. The neural chip was placed at the base of her neck, cold at first, then warm as it linked to her thoughts. Kalen stepped back, his heart racing. "Try to move your left leg," he said. Brows tightened in focus. Nothing happened at first. Then the left leg moved, just a little, just an inch, but it was real. Vera gasped, shocked. Kalen smiled. "That's it, do it again." Hour by hour she trained. The frame made her stronger, but her will made her rise. She fell many times, hard falls that bruised her knees and scraped her arms, but she got back up every time. Kalen never shouted, never gave up on her. He only offered his hand, and his quiet voice. "You're doing it," he'd say. "You're not broken, not anymore." One night, after a long day of practice, Vera sat alone in the lab while Kalen slept upstairs. She stared at the frame beside her, the machine that now felt like part of her body. Then she looked around the lab, her eyes falling on blueprints and unfinished designs. With shaking hands, she picked up a stylus and began to draw lines, shapes, ideas. They flowed out of her like water breaking a dam. She didn't know what she was designing, but it felt right. It felt like her voice, her power finally waking up. When Kalen came down the next morning, he saw the sketches. He picked one up, eyes wide. "You did this?" he asked. Vera gave a small nod. "I think it could improve your sensor response," she said, surprising even herself. Kalen laughed in joy. "You're not just walking, Vera," he said. "You're rebuilding yourself." Vera's days no longer passed in silence. Her hands were busy now, her eyes full of focus. The girl who once sat still like a statue now stood beside Kaylin, covered in wires and steel. Her new legs, thin but strong, wrapped her lower body like armor. And even though she still wobbled, even though her balance was not perfect, she walked, not just across the room, but across fear. Kaylin modified the exoframe daily. He added more comfort padding, adjusted the torque, and installed a smart stabilizer behind her spine. Sometimes he worked with a tool in one hand and a sandwich in the other. Vera would smile now, just a little, when he dropped crumbs on her blueprint sketches. She had started to draw more, not only upgrades, but ideas, inventions, things no one had built yet. And Kaylin never laughed, never doubted. He only said, "Let's try it." Her body still ached often. The muscles in her back complained. Her arms got tired from using support bars. But she never asked to stop, not once. She practiced for hours, walking, turning, lifting, even climbing one step at a time. Each small win was like breaking a chain wrapped around her past. But the outside world was not quiet. Rumors had begun to spread beyond the desert village. They said the Baron's broken daughter could walk now. Some laughed, some didn't believe it. Others, powerful ones, began to watch from a distance. Baron Vess, her father, heard the whispers too. At first he ignored them, calling it all nonsense. But the idea kept itching in his pride. If true, it meant he had lost control, and that he could not allow back at the lab. Vera faced a new challenge. Kaylin had finished building the upper body assist module, a set of arms that attached to her shoulders. Not to replace her limbs, but to help with weight lifting and balance. "You'll be able to move heavy things," he explained. "Carry tools, defend yourself, maybe even fly someday." Vera raised an eyebrow. "Fly?" Kaylin chuckled. One step at a time. The fitting was painful. The shoulder nodes had to connect with her nerves. She cried a little when the cold metal clicked against bone. But she didn't ask him to stop. When it was done, her hands shook. But her back stood straighter. Kaylin offered her a small metal cube to test grip strength. She picked it up with both hands, held it for 10 seconds, then dropped it with a clunk. A moment of silence passed. Then she looked up and whispered, "I feel strong." That night, Vera couldn't sleep. She walked outside the lab for the first time since she arrived. The desert wind was cold, sharp, but it made her feel alive. She looked up at the stars, her frame glowing gently in the moonlight. A wild creature howled in the distance, but she didn't flinch. She felt something new blooming inside her, not just strength, but hunger, not for food, but for life, for more. She returned to the lab and found Kaylin working late again. He was building a set of sensory goggles that could help her navigate dark terrain. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. "You're still awake," he said, wiping oil from his cheek. "I want to train more," Vera said, her voice clear. He stood, surprised but proud. "Right now?" She nodded. "Yes, I want to run." They went to the testing hallway, a long stretch with padded walls and sensors. Vera stood at the start line, her legs humming softly, her back straight. Kaylin pressed a button, and the timer began. She started walking, then faster. Her frame responded with smooth motion, shifting weight perfectly. She was running, not fast, not graceful, but real. And when she reached the end, she laughed. Not a small smile, but a real laugh, full of breath and joy. Kaylin clapped from the other side, smiling wider than ever. "You did it," he said. Vera's eyes sparkled. "No," she replied. "We did it." For the first time, she believed she was no longer just a burden, no longer something to be hidden away. She was becoming something new, something dangerous to those who once controlled her. She looked at her metal limbs, her strong frame, and her glowing fingertips. She was part machine now, but her heart beat stronger than ever. And deep inside she knew this was only the beginning. The sun rose red over the desert that morning. But something darker was coming. Kaylin and Vera were in the workshop, testing her upper arm assist motors. She lifted a heavy storage box with ease now. her body moving smoother each day. But suddenly, the air outside changed. The lab's sensor lights turned orange, blinking rapidly. Unregistered transport approaching. Kalen stepped to the monitor, and his face tightened. On the screen, 3 black hovercrafts sliced through the sand. A symbol painted in red on their sides, the royal crest of House Vess. Her father, Vera, froze, her hands trembling slightly. But she didn't fall back into her chair. She stood tall, her frame humming softly beneath her skin. I knew he'd come, she said quietly. Kalen nodded. And you're ready now. The crafts landed just outside the lab. Dust clouds danced in the wind as armored soldiers marched out in formation. And behind them, stepping down from a tall, gold-trimmed hovercraft, came Baron Vess. His robe shimmered, his horns polished to perfection, and his cruel smirk was still the same. He entered the workshop like he owned it. Guards behind him, weapons ready. He looked around with disgust, then spotted Vera standing near a table full of tools. He raised an eyebrow and laughed. So the rumors were true, he said. You walk now. Vera didn't blink, didn't flinch. I do more than walk, she replied, her voice firm. The Baron's smile faded just slightly. You are still mine, he growled. You are my blood, my burden, my broken child. You gave me away like garbage, she said, stepping forward. I gave you to prove a point, he snapped. And now look at you, full of wires and human dirt. Kalen stepped between them, his jaw tight. She's not yours anymore, he said. The Baron chuckled. Oh, she's mine by law, by blood, by tradition, and I can take her back. But Vera didn't wait for Kalen to answer. She stepped beside him and looked her father in the eyes. No, she said. You can't. The Baron's face twisted in anger. You dare defy your father in front of his soldiers? I dare to be free, she answered. And if you think I'm afraid of you, then you truly don't know me anymore. Gasps came from the guards. One of them lowered his weapon slightly, unsure. Vera saw it, and so did her father. He stepped closer, his voice colder now. If you want to prove you're more than a broken girl in a costume, then show it, he hissed. Face my champion in trial, the old way, the way of strength. Kalen opened his mouth to protest, but Vera lifted a hand. I accept, she said. Kalen looked at her in shock. Are you sure? Yes, she said firmly. I'm not running anymore. The Baron grinned like a predator. 3 days from now, he said, you fight in the grand arena, in front of the council. If you lose, you return to me, and I melt that metal off your body. And if I win? Vera asked. You won't, he replied, then turned and walked away. The soldiers followed in silence. The desert swallowed them once more. As soon as they left, Kalen turned to Vera. You don't have to prove anything to that monster, he said. But I do, she replied softly. Not for him. For me, that night, the lab was full of quiet energy. Vera studied combat modules and motion simulations. Kalen installed defensive enhancements in her leg frame, reinforced joints, reaction boosters, impact shields. They trained together. In the test hallway, over and over, she fell. She rose, she bled, and she smiled through it. Every bruise was proof she wasn't weak anymore. On the final night before the fight, Kalen handed her a thin silver necklace. What's this? She asked. It belonged to my sister, he said. She never stopped fighting either. Vera held it in her hand, her fingers brushing the smooth surface. I'll make you proud, she whispered. You already have, he replied, outside. The stars watched in silence. Vera stood at the door of the lab, looking at the arena lights in the distance. For so long, she had been nothing more than a forgotten girl in a chair. Now she was metal, she was muscle, she was mind, but most of all, she was her own. The grand arena stood tall in the heart of the Bharati capital. Built from black stone and glowing crystal, it had witnessed centuries of blood, honor, and tradition. Today, the crowd roared not for a champion, but for a spectacle. They came to see a joke. A broken girl in metal limbs fail in front of her people. But none of them had seen Vera's journey. None of them knew the fire that now burned inside her. Kalen stood beside her in the prep chamber beneath the arena. He adjusted the sensors on her backplate and double-checked the neural stabilizer. At her spine, Vera stood silently, eyes closed, breathing steady. She wore a sleek combat suit over her exoframe, dark silver with soft blue lights pulsing across it. She looked more like a warrior now than the helpless girl once abandoned in a hover chair. "You know you don't have to do this," Kalen said again gently. Vera opened her eyes and smiled slightly. "I'm not doing this for him," she said. "I'm doing it for every time I was told I was nothing." Kalen placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then go show them what nothing can become." The horn above the arena echoed loud and deep. The gates opened, and the blinding sunlight poured in. Vera stepped forward, each step making a soft metal thud. The crowd went quiet at first. Then laughter and whispers filled the air. "Look at her," someone shouted. "She snapped like glass. She's no fighter. She's just a walking lab experiment," another mocked, but Vera didn't hear them. Her focus was locked on the opponent across the arena. A towering alien male, twice her size, wearing traditional warrior armor. He carried a long staff charged with electric blades on both ends. His muscles flexed as he turned toward her, cracking his neck. He didn't see her as a threat, just a formality, a warm-up before dinner. The arena master raised his hand. "Trial by strength," he announced. "Ends only when one yields or falls." He looked at both fighters and nodded. "Begin." The warrior charged instantly, roaring. Vera stepped aside with sharp precision. Dodging the first swing, her metal legs hissed as they boosted her backwards. She slid across the sand, sparks flying behind her heels. The crowd gasped. She had moved fast, faster than they expected. The warrior attacked again, this time aiming low. Vera blocked with her arm braces, absorbing the shock with her reinforced shoulder supports. She grunted, her arm shaking, but she didn't fall. Instead, she twisted under the next blow and slammed a punch into his ribs. He staggered back in surprise. Not pain, but confusion. She was stronger than she looked. For minutes, the two danced between hits and dodges. Vera used her speed, staying light on her feet, using her tech to outsmart his raw power. Every time he expected her to run, she attacked. Every time he thought she was weak, she proved him wrong. But the warrior landed a heavy hit to her side, knocking her to the ground. The crowd cheered. The Baron stood up with a smirk. Vera lay still for a moment, her chest rising and falling. Then she remembered falling back at the lab. She remembered bruised knees, burning muscles, Kalen's voice saying, "Again." She rolled over and pushed herself to her feet. Slowly but surely, the warrior hesitated, now breathing heavier than before. Vera stood tall again, her legs humming, her core stabilizer adjusting balance automatically. Then, for the first time, she spoke to him. "You think you're strong because you've never been broken," she said. "I'm strong because I have." She activated the overdrive in her arms and rushed forward. The warrior lifted his staff, but Vera ducked under it and drove a punch into his chest. Her fist cracked his armor, sending him stumbling backward. She followed with a spin kick, using her powered legs, and it hit him square in the jaw. The warrior fell to one knee, dazed, bleeding from the mouth. "Yield," the arena master said. But the warrior roared and stood again. He lifted his staff for one last strike, and Vera caught it mid-swing with both hands. Her arms shook, but she held firm. Then she twisted the weapon, using his momentum to flip him over her shoulder. He crashed to the ground, hard, and didn't rise again. Silence fell over the arena. The crowd, once mocking, now stared in stunned silence. The arena master raised his hand. "Victory to Vera of House Vess," he declared. Kalen rushed onto the field, his smile brighter than the sun. Vera stood breathing hard, bruised but unbroken. The Baron stared down at the arena from the royal box, fists clenched. He had given her away to humiliate her. Now she stood before all, not as a joke, but as a champion, and the world would never look at her the same again. News of Vera's victory spread faster than fire in dry wind. By nightfall, every screen in the capital showed her final blow. A girl once called useless had brought down a royal warrior in front of thousands, and not with magic or luck, but with strength, skill, and her own rebuilt body. The next morning, reporters gathered outside Kaylin's lab. Drones hovered in the sky, flashing lights and snapping photos. Everyone wanted to speak to the Iron Princess. That's what they called her now, part machine, part legend. But to Kaylin, she was still Vera, the girl who once sat in silence, staring at a world that had left her behind. Vera stood at the center of the lab as Kaylin added a new upgrade to her arm frame, a small device that could scan materials and analyze weakness in seconds. "It'll help you in rescue work," he said. "You won't need to guess where to cut or pull." Vera nodded, her eyes focused. She no longer looked uncertain. Now, she moved like someone who had found her place in the world. Children began visiting the lab, alien girls with bent spines, boys missing limbs from old attacks. They looked at Vera with wide, hopeful eyes. She knelt down and showed them her joints, let them touch the smooth plates of her frame, and when one girl asked, "Does it hurt?" Vera smiled gently. "Not anymore." With Kaylin's help, she started a small program. They called it Project Ember, a name born from her favorite saying, "Even the smallest fire can become a star." They designed simple assist frames for the injured, starting with the children. Kaylin led the designs. But it was Vera who inspired the plans. She knew exactly what it felt like to be forgotten, so she made sure no one else would be. Soon off-world doctors, inventors, and leaders arrived. They offered money, labs, fame, even control. But Vera refused every deal that came with a price. "This belongs to the broken," she said, "not the rich." One night, as she walked through the lab, she paused beside an old mirror. It was cracked at the corner, dust on its frame. She saw her reflection, not just her face, but the glow of her spine, the curve of her frame, the strength in her arms. She didn't flinch anymore. She didn't see a monster. She saw power. She saw her. Kaylin watched from a distance, smiling. Softly, he saw more than just steel and tech. He saw a leader forming, not because she wanted to be worshipped, but because she knew what it felt like to be abandoned. But not everyone celebrated her rise. Some of the noble houses called her an unnatural example. Old lords whispered that tradition was being broken. They feared a future where daughters wouldn't stay quiet, where the weak could rise without permission. They saw Vera not as a hero, but a threat. One morning, a note arrived at the lab, left on the doorstep in a plain envelope. No seal, no name. Vera opened it carefully. Inside was a message made from cut-out letters. "You should have stayed broken, princess. The machine cannot save your soul." Kaylin's face turned dark. "We need to increase lab security," he said, but Vera shook her head. "I won't hide," she said. "Not again." Instead, she made her schedule public. She appeared at schools, hospitals, even the garbage fields, helping, speaking, listening. And everywhere she went, someone followed. A child with missing fingers, a mother with a weak son, a soldier with a shattered back, and each time Vera bent down, told them they were still whole, still human, still worth saving. Her fame reached the stars. An Earth ambassador sent her a medal, calling her the bridge between species. But Vera kept it in a box, unopened. She didn't care for medals, she cared for results. Late one night, Kaylin found her outside, welding a new leg frame for a boy who had fallen into machinery. "You never stop," he said, shaking his head. Vera looked up, her eyes glowing slightly in the dark. "I stopped once," she said. "It nearly killed me." Kaylin sat beside her. "You've become something more than I ever dreamed." She smiled faintly. "You saw it before I did, but in the shadows." Beyond the capital, others were watching. A group who believed in pure blood, pure tradition. To them, Vera wasn't hope. She was a symbol that had to be erased, and they were ready to strike. The lab was quiet that night. The soft hum of power cores filled the air as Vera finished sealing a support frame for a child with no legs. Kaylin had already gone to rest upstairs. Trusting her to close up, she moved gently through the lab, checking each system, cleaning the tools. Outside, the desert wind howled. But something else moved in the shadows, something darker, colder. And it was not the wind. A group in dark cloaks circled the lab, their steps silent, their eyes hidden behind black visors. They called themselves the Keepers of Blood, a secret order that believed technology had no place in bloodlines, especially not in royal ones. To them, Vera was not a girl, not a warrior, not a symbol. She was a mistake that had gone too far. And tonight, they came to erase her. Vera didn't see the first signs. The lights flickered slightly, a normal glitch in the older panels. But then the main door clicked softly, and not by her hand. She turned, her senses alert. Too late. Smoke burst into the room, thick and choking. She coughed and activated her visor, switching to heat vision. Figures moved through the mist, fast, silent, trained. They grabbed her arms, hitting her with an electric pulse that shut down her exoframe systems. Her legs buckled, her strength vanished, and she hit the floor hard. They dragged her out of the lab, loading her into a black hovercraft. She tried to scream, but her voice was choked by pain and static. The last thing she saw was her lab in flames. Not real flames, but smoke bombs to make it look destroyed. They wanted Kaylin to believe she was dead. And they wanted the world to forget her. Hours passed in darkness. When Vera woke, she was inside a cold metal room, chained to a chair bolted to the floor. The walls were gray and silent, no windows, no exits. Her frame systems were still offline, and her arms ached with bruises. A voice spoke through a hidden speaker. "You were born broken," the voice said, deep and sharp. "And you were meant to stay that way." Vera didn't reply. "You inspire weakness." The voice continued. "You challenge the old ways. The true ways." "Good," she whispered, her throat dry. "That means I'm doing something right." Meanwhile, back in the ruins of the lab, Kaylin crawled through the smoke. He found broken tables, melted chips, and Vera's signature glove lying on the floor. His heart stopped. He screamed her name again and again, but no answer came, and in that moment, something in him cracked, not in despair, but in fury. "They took her," he growled. "They made a mistake." He activated a secret backup, a tracking chip built into the spinal base of her suit. A tiny signal appeared, weak but alive. She was still out there, and he was going to find her, with help from Vera's students and some local workers she had once helped. Kaylin built a rescue team, old soldiers, scavenger pilots, even one reformed mercenary. They rode across the desert in silent speedcrafts, following the signal through canyons and dead forests. Each mile burned with urgency. They were not rescuing a princess. They were retrieving a symbol of hope back. In the prison, Vera worked in silence. Though her arms were bound, her mind was not. She whispered commands to her internal systems, slowly rebooting backup energy. Her left leg clicked softly, barely alive. But it was something. She counted the seconds, the movements, the guard changes, and when one guard entered to check her vitals, she acted with a sharp twist of her shoulder. She used her powered elbow brace to strike the guard's knee. He fell stunned. She grabbed his keycard and unlocked her wrist cuffs. Her systems roared back online, weak but enough. She ripped off the restraints, stood tall, and faced the door. No more hiding, no more chains. Just as more guards stormed in, the walls of the base shook. Explosions hit the outer gates, and bright lights flashed outside. Kaylin had arrived, leading the charge. Vera smiled, her eyes blazing. She met the guards head-on, metal limbs flashing, every movement sharp and powerful. She was not a prisoner. She was a force. She found Kaylin near the entrance, injured but still fighting. She lifted him with one arm and led the team out. Behind them, the base collapsed in flames. The keepers were defeated, their plans shattered, their lies exposed. A week later, Vera stood before a massive crowd in the Capitol Square. She didn't wear a dress nor carry a title. She stood in her suit, glowing, scarred, and proud. "I am not just a machine," she said. "I am not your joke, not your property, not your shame. I am what you could never break," the crowd roared. Not in laughter, but in honor. Children waved metal flowers, her students raised banners of Project Ember, and far in the crowd, the Baron watched with dead eyes. His gift had risen, not as his joke, but as the future.